What is up, nerds? My name is Jeremy Akers, Jeremy Nathaniel Akers to be all precise about it, and I want to talk to you about one of my favorite liberating structures, transition walking, also known up in the hood as grief walking. The important part is you're up against it. You're going to go for a walk. We're going to get into it in a minute, but first, why? Well, first, I'm going to give you nerds some shit that I like. Right? This is generally well established as good vibes, right? When things go wrong, as they sometimes will, when the road you're trudging seems all uphill, when the funds are low and debts are high, when you want to smile, but you have to sigh, when care is pressing you down a bit, rest if you must, but don't you quit. Life is queer with its twists and turns, as every one of us sometimes learns, and many failures turn about when we might have won had we stuck it out. Don't give up, though peace seems slow. You may succeed with another blow. Often the goal is nearer than it seems to a faint and faltering man. Often the struggler has given up when he might have captured the victor's cup. And had he learned too late when the night slipped down how close he was to the golden crown. Success is failure turned inside out, the silver tent of clouds of doubt. And you never can tell how close you are. It may be near when it seems far. So stick to the fight when you're hardest hit. It's when things seem worse that you must not quit. Oh, what a good vibe, right? Never give up, right? Right? I mean, these are the nerds that raised me effectively, that I grew up on. You know, this is to me the aspect of courage that is the most profound. Never give up, right? Never give up on your friends. You know, keep having faith when the chips are down. You know, just believe and keep going through all the things you've prepared in the past. And be the beneficiary of all the care you have to express. It's just such good vibes. I've got goosebumps, nerds. And yet, the ego cycle is the ego cycle. As much as we would love to enjoy eternal harvest, creative destruction is always one banana peel around the corner. We have a survivorship bias when it comes to creative destruction, when it comes to innovation, when it comes to transformation and change. But the fact of the matter is, not all of us make it. Actually. Not all things turn out rosy. Sometimes the flood comes and it just takes everything. The fire comes and it consumes all. And some of that may be our very lives. Sometimes the things that are blown apart never quite come back together again. When we're pushed up against incredible transitions, when we're stuck with circumstances way beyond our control that are going to have and already have and imply, they forebode yet more implications, yet more negative predictions, yet more clouds on the horizon and bears on the path. Yeah, what are you going to do? You still got a fucking deal, huh? Totally sucks. I mean, as much as I want to collapse into dark days, life goes on. And sometimes that's without a leg, right? Sometimes that's crippled. Sometimes that's with circumstances that are not going to be okay. And in those moments, you might just need yourself some transition walking. All right, so that's the why. Big stuff. big shit's going down, and you got to deal with it. And there's lots of feels about that big stuff and the dealing with it. So much to navigate, so much to disambiguate and explore together. How are we going to do that? We're going to make use of the spiral journal. So to give a quick refresh on that infrastructure, we are going to invite some nerds to gather some materials. If you don't have them ready, if you can, get them ready. Give them a big ass piece of paper. I'm a huge fan of A3 as a format personally, but do what you need. A4. Come on, if you're a notebook nerd, use your notebook, of course. But come on, let's go big or go home. What we're going to do in that big ass piece of paper is we're going to draw ourselves a 2x2 matrix and across the entire page, and then we're going to invite those nerds to draw a concentric spiral. And we can add as many adjectives as we'd like to the type of spiral we want them to draw. The nicest, cleanest, tidiest, smoothest, slowest, most mindful spiral you can possibly imagine. You can draw it the right spiral way. You can draw it the wrong spiral way if you want to go for bonus points. But guess what? There are no bonus points for suffering, ladies and gentlemen. So choose your starting point on your page. Many nerds like to go for the center. It's a good starting point, but be funky. Get creative if you want to. Draw yourself a spiral. Take a minute or two to do that. And then we're going to use some free associative writing to respond to the following prompts. And getting back to grief walking, we're going to use these prompts in particular, or transition walking. So that's your output for spiral journal. And in each one of those quadrants, we're going to respond to, yes, it is true that. So pick a quadrant, whichever quadrant is for your first quadrant. Yes, it is true that. ... ellipsis. Just give nerds some space to come to grips with what the meaningful thing is for them in their own words. Right? A minute or two on the clock. Not too much, not too long. But hey, maybe you want to take your time. It depends on the transition and the vibe you're trying to set. Point is, after yes, it is true that, we want to move on to the so what. It is challenging because what makes those things meaningful and significant for us? What is the essence of what we're feeling and what is putting us to the moment? In our third quadrant, I will always remember and never forget super salience tagging here, nerds. Come on. What are the things that are going to stick with us? How have we been changed by the time before the times and the time that this time is putting upon us? What are the things that we're going to take with us that leave us impacted, that have impacted the world? And last but not least, our now what? Now that I have shared my feels, it may be possible to. Now that I have reflected on this predicament, now that I have paid attention to my emotions, it may be possible to. So 2 minutes per prompt, and 8 or so minutes, that gets us to our next phase. And with our spiral journal, if you want to tack on more time to circle some words and do some metacognition on top of the journal, right? Look at your journal, look at your responses. What do you notice? Circle some stuff. What seems particularly salient? Where are the feels active the most? At any rate, once we've done our spiral journal, we are going to set up the physical space by inviting nerds to set up 4 listening stations in a pretty large room, and we're going to invite some other nerds to volunteer as walkers. And those walkers are going to share the content of their spiral journal with these 4 different listening stations. So everybody's going to sort of spread out across these 4 listening stations, right? Like so. We've got some nerds here in the middle volunteering as walkers. We've got station 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're set up. We're ready to rock. Now, what our walkers are going to do is one at a time, they're going to go through each one of these listening stations, and they're going to read one response to one of their prompts at each station, right? So we're going to manage our anxieties of oversharing that only very few, nobody's really going to get the whole story of your story. You're exposing part of yourself and not the whole thing in one dose. So it's much more manageable. At any rate, we want to let these nerds volunteer. No need to encourage nerds who don't feel the vibe to enter into anxiety-inducing territory by being visible. So, at any rate, as these walkers pass through each listening station, one of the listeners, at least one who vibes with that particular walker and that share, is going to go stand behind the walker and just place a hand of support on the walker's shoulder. And then they are going to follow the walker from next station, next station, next station. So, what's that going to look like? We're going to go on a little journey. I'm going to follow my boy Blue here as he shares at these listening stations. So Blue is a volunteer walker, and he shows up at listening station 1, where Blue reads their prompt. Yes, it is true that... ... They read their response to that prompt. And in response to their prompt, the most Blue vibey of the group stands next to them, puts their hand on the shoulder, and it's like, yeah, yes, it is true that. I'm on that team. I'm with you. And then they go to the next station. And as you see, Purple does the same, goes to station 1 and repeats the first prompt. But Blue goes on to station 2 with their follower, and it is hard because they read their response to that prompt. And the most Blue vibey of those nerds jumps into the bandwagon and says, yeah, I'm with you, Blue. And then they move on to station number 3 as Orange moves into station number 1. And they read their response here to I will always remember and never forget. So what was it? That super salient in there. And then the Blue nerd joins the caravan onto station number 4 where they read the response. And now that I've paid attention to my feeling, it may be possible too. And then the most Blue vibey nerd joins the caravan. And then they are now sort of clustered up. So where we had difference, we have a cluster of similarity. And what are we going to invite those nerds to do? Now that they have been through the final listening station, the walkers, with at least their 4 followers, are going to go to a quiet place and debrief, right? And you can prepare whatever line of inquiry you want. The one out of the box with grief walking is, what did you notice as a follower? What did these nerds, have in common? What was the vibe like, in this atmosphere? It's going to be a vibe. It's going to be a very interesting vibe. Why did you follow? What was it that touched you, that was significant for you? What did you experience as a walker, right? These nerds just shared a whole lot of themselves, and one of these nerds at least heard the whole thing. So what was that like? And what are you carrying or sharing any feels? What's the vibe? What's going on in your right now as you're sort of in this pocket of stillness with this shit going on around you in the eye of the storm? And now what, of course, right? We want to end in towards enabling action. Now what do you need from one another, right? We're building these bases, these pockets of solidarity where we're connecting to one another. So it's a great time to extend oneself and to make an offer and an ask. So all told, this whole song and dance will take you about an hour. You'll need a big space that can accommodate lots of nerds talking, and the vibe is going to be the vibe. So you'll notice some somberness, you'll notice some awkwardness, you'll notice some interesting space for reflection. So since I animated these goddamn things, you damn right I'm going to show you nerds that all these groups are going to sort of come together. They're going to cluster. Now, I don't want to be so bold as to presume that these nerds are, of course, going to be uniform in similarity. We're talking about feels. We're talking about vibes here. Of course, there's going to be a lot of richness in differentiation. But what's cool about gathering based on some form of similarity is that with time, each one of these nerds will notice some form of distinction in their particulars of these vibes, right? Even though there's a similarity that is global, they will notice a difference between them. And that's actually a good move. That's a great move from the perspective of integration. This move of differentiation makes the move of integration much more possible. So, after your debrief, you may want to consider, if you've time is a no object, reconstellating in something like the original clusters, and then like having a vibe on, what came up for these nerds, so that even across these differences, now that we've seen these distinctions between us, we can integrate those differences into a larger sort of conceptual experiential frame, right? That's the idea, anyway. If time was a luxury that you've got, I would highly encourage you to do something along those lines. The point is, nerds, is that sometimes it's not okay. Sometimes it hurts. Sometimes the empire strikes back, and you might find yourself in that seemingly unendless tunnel. And shit, the night is dark and full of terrors and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, man, point is, you might need yourself some transition walking if you're dealing with some big change. You'd like to support one another in a pretty, like I said, visceral and emotional process. You might need yourself some transition walking, nerds. That's the whole point. Sorry if I'm being super redundant and excessively reflective. My name is Jeremy. This is transition walking. Hope this is useful. Go out there and get dangerous, nerds.